Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk Live. I'm your host, Dani Nierenberg. So over the years, I've talked to a lot of CEOs from different food and agrochemical companies, a lot of CSOs, a lot of COOs. And some I've been really impressed by and others not so much. But today I get to talk to, again, really to Jeff Dunn, the chair and chief executive officer at Bolthouse Farms. Jeff spoke at one of Food Tank's very first summits in Washington, D.C. So I'm really glad to have him back with us because I think he is one of those enlightened CEOs, someone who's really trying to make the food system better with his products and with Bolthouse Farms in general. Jeff says he's working to put Bolthouse Farms at the forefront of the plant produce industry through plant-powered swaps and marketing campaigns to persuade Americans to eat more plants. He wants to build a better food industry to help address some of the major diet-related health issues Americans face, problems that we've discussed a lot on this show, heart disease, diabetes, obesity. And of course, we're seeing how these diseases are impacting how people react to COVID-19. Bolthouse Farms' motto is plants powering people, and their new direction and guiding mission is to build a plant-based food system for the 21st century. Just a little background on Jeff. He's worked at Coca-Cola. He worked at Bolthouse before it was acquired by Campbell's Soup, and he became the president of the Campbell's Fresh division. But Jeff made a really interesting decision, and one I want to talk about later, because that acquisition was quote unquote not a good marriage, apparently. Butterfly Equity, where Jeff is an operating partner, made a deal to buy Bolthouse back at a fraction of the price it was sold. Do I have that all right, Jeff? Did I get that all?
Yeah, you had it, I think, perfect, Dani. It was not the best marriage, and when they decided to sell the business, my partners and I, very committed to buying it back. That was a process, as you can imagine, but we came out the winners, and that was about 15 months ago. So we've been hard at work, kind of putting the business onto its future footing. We're excited, and thanks for having me on today.
Of course, congrats. I think there's so many things that are interesting that we can talk about today. So I want to talk about your motto first, this plants powering people. How does that manifest in sort of the mission of the company? Now that you're your own thing, you're separate, you can do more than you probably could before.
Yeah, it's well, we're kind of back to doing, the thing we did before Campbell's. No, it really wasn't about Campbell's. I just think it was a round peg in a square hole, bottom line. But for us as an independent company, one thing's become clear to me in the last 10 years, and my story, the first 20 years was Coke, and an incredible brand, incredible company, but too much sugar, too much of a good thing became very problematic, and I've spoken about that. Same thing with the processed food business. Wasn't really intended to be what we ate all the time. Yeah. Too much sugar, salt, and fat, as my friend Michael Moss talks about. So for us, Plants Powering People is really a mission. It's a product focus, and it's really about how do we take the best part of plants, and you say a carrot for that matter, and turn it into really relevant products, because the consumer has said unequivocally they want healthier products, they want great tasting, convenient, and affordable products. The issue is sometimes the healthy products were either not that affordable, kind of for the wealthy, not that interesting or accessible flavor-wise. Some of the historic kind of vegan products really didn't perform. So we think we're on the cusp, and look, it was certainly led by Impossible and Beyond, creating kind of a whole new product category. But it's much broader than that. It's the consumer recognizing, and Michael Pollan said it best, eat more plants, less animals, you're going to be healthier, it's better for the planet. So as a product strategy, as a kind of mission for the company, it was super clear to us. That's the space we want to be in. And by the way, it'll be the fastest growing space in the food business for the next 10 years.
It definitely will be. And I think there's been this evolution, since Michael Pollan wrote his book, Omnivore's Dilemma, about 14 years ago now, where, people are thinking more about the connections between food and the environment and their own health. And you remarked that, Bolthouse wants to use the best part of the product, but you've also been a really huge supporter of reducing and supporting food waste initiatives. I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about that. That's always been one of the hottest topics since Food Tank began 7 years ago. It's something that everyone can take a part in. What is Bolthouse doing?
Yeah, we're doing a couple of things. One is, when you think about food waste, it's really from the field all the way through people's homes,
Right.
right? At every step, we're all wasting food, and we're wasting too much food because every time you throw something away, it's got to go in a landfill. But there was energy, there was resources put into growing that food that needs to be put in to driving better nutrition. And so when we think about food waste, I think that we're on the cusp, really with blockchain probably is the underpinning, but to start to understand supply chains so we can reduce that food waste at every stage. So the supply chain, it's a big issue. What's interesting to us is that the consumer, as you said, when it comes to things like food waste, is actually connecting the dots now.
Right.
How I eat impacts my health, but it also impacts my community and impacts the planet and ultimately the future for my family and my children. And so as these trends come together, what we've seen, and Acre Venture Partners is our venture firm we launched, and Sam's part of that firm, and they've been very focused
Sam
on these big
right?
issues, right? So how do you solve food waste? You need better data, you need better use for those products, but we also need the consumer on the other side to their part, which to me is about how you shop. And the great thing about e-commerce and the emerging kind of shift in food away from just going to the grocery store, looking at a shelf, filling your pantry, to more food, how you want it, when you want it, the way you want it, I actually think could be very productive when it comes to food waste, because you can start to have smaller formats and fresher food. Again, I have to buy food every few days because I eat fresh food, and so it's really a change in not just how we shop, but how we eat. And those two things are coming together in a very real way. All of that, I think, impacts food waste. But on the ag side, we're doing something really interesting. We're going to start measuring. We use about 98% of the carrot now by weight.
Right.
We want to use all of it. So we're looking at the last parts of the carrot we don't use, to see what useful ideas. And there's a new technology. It could even be turned into packaging. So, packaging that could go back into composting, closed loop systems.
Absolutely.
Those are, I think, part of the real solution.
You mentioned a couple of things here that I want to go back to. You mentioned all of the resources that go into producing food. And my friend Dana Gunders at ReFed, she likes to talk not only about the labor and the natural resources, but the love. And I think that's something that, we all love food, but the folks who grow it and harvest it also love it too. There's a lot of these resources that go into producing food. And Dana has also said some interesting things around how COVID-19 is affecting food waste. She's really predicting, she's one of the foremost leaders on food waste in the United States, that because of the e-commerce solutions that you've been mentioning, the e-commerce that's been happening because of COVID-19, more people are ordering online because of health concerns, that they're planning meals more. And so they're shopping very differently, as you said. And so there's less waste. And because some of them are shopping more frequently, like you do, because they're eating more plants, again, concerns about COVID and overall health and this idea of food as medicine. Is Bolthouse, have you been able to keep up? There's been so many disruptions in the supply chain since the beginning of COVID. Have you been able to keep up with this demand?
Yeah, we have. And it really goes to, look, COVID has changed almost everything. Obviously, all of our lives have been impacted. COVID, from our standpoint, we had a big surge of demand in March and April as people stocked up. That was really difficult to keep up with that demand. And most of it was carrot, carrot in our beverage business, but most of it was carrot. People like really going home, and that our team did an incredible job, but we had to re-engineer how we ran the business operationally from start to finish. In the early part of March, we went to 10 people teams, put them all in different colored lanyards, and they would work together the whole day and not interface with any other employees. So we create pods. We also had to put in all of our own testing and tracking in so we could test people coming in. We've taken over 400,000 temperatures. And then finally, we put our own tracing. So when we had a contact, we would go back with that person because the government wasn't helping us there. And we would trace it back so we could understand how many other people had been impacted. All of that allowed us to have very high fill rates and keep up and running in kind of March, April, May as things were really crazy. And so, we were really proud of our team. Not all supply chains were able to do that though, and we're starting to feel it again as this second wave comes, which has already started in Europe. People are starting to stock up again. And look, I think the biggest thing people can do is not freak out. Supply chain in the food in the United States, pretty robust. I think we demonstrated that. The meat supply chain, less robust, but that's a whole nother podcast, because there's reasons the meat supply chain didn't hold up when the rest of it did.
Absolutely.
And it's the nature of those COFCOs and those large feeding facilities.
Well, and it's also, I think, the nature, and I want to get into this a little bit more. It's the nature of leadership. So you talked about, in the absence of federal leadership on many things around COVID, your company decided, to do all the things that you just described. But, when we're talking about the meat packing industry, they decided very bluntly not to have that sort of, they were not leaders in this space, and they showed a lack of concern, not only for their own workers, but their consumers as well. And so I think they have a lot to learn from companies like yours and many others who have stepped up to the plate and really taken on a role that should have come from the top down in so many ways. So I want to thank you for that. You mentioned, a lot of the sort of ag tech that Bolthouse is doing. Can we dig a little bit deeper? I know that's an issue that's very important to you in the company. What kinds of technologies are you using?
Well, I'd say the technologies kind of are in three big buckets. Okay. So the first one is really what I would describe as data and machine learning. So we're doing a couple of things with data and machine learning. Well, obviously we have tons of data because of all of our agronomic data, all of our farming data, and through the plant, and then obviously all the consumer and customer kind of data. But the biggest thing for us in the early stage of this, in terms of machine learning, we're trying to learn how to create a machine learning approach to things like weeding. So we put cameras on the front of planters, and we start to have those cameras look at weeds so they can start to differentiate between what a weed is and what a carrot top is. Because then all of a sudden, if you can start to identify that, you can be very precise in weeding. One, it saves a lot of labor, because most weeding today in agriculture is done by humans. It's really a terrible job and not very efficient. So if you get a machine do weeding, now you start to see robotics coming in to replace a lot of jobs that have been really farm worker driven. And again, I think this is the connection of machine learning to robotics in large scale farming is critical, because I think, one, it's going to be really much more efficient. We've got aging out of farmers across the world. Average age of farmers in the United States, I think, is now 66. And so we've got to use kind of new technologies, I think, to replace what a lot of human systems were in the early days. So that's an interesting one we started. But with COVID, one of the things we knew was behaviorally, one of the toughest things in we have 2,000 people in our plant. So it's like, it's a big plant. One of the biggest things is they're used to moving around and doing things, a certain way, but we've had to retrain them because we don't want them coming within 6 feet of each other. So we put 400 cameras using machine learning to watch people, and they can start to see where they come together, and actually starting to send direct buzzes to their badge that says you're coming close, kind of red, green, yellow. And then separately, we're using low Bluetooth devices that can also be in a badge that can track where people are. And if you come within 6 feet of somebody, it'll buzz. All of this will come back to changing behavior. I think everyone could actually get their head around wearing a mask and social distancing if, one, we had better leadership on that. We all have to do it to stay safe. And two, that all of a sudden, with the right reinforcement, our behaviors can change. And look, we want to go back to the way it was, but until it's safe, we need a new way of being. Absolutely. That's where we really lost the thread on this conversation. It became, we could politicize it and you do it and I won't. But look, that doesn't work. We all have to do it, full stop.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I wish I had the buzzers that you're talking about when I walk down the street to keep people 6 feet away from me. I think that would be really effective. But again, everyone, please wear your mask. I don't know how this became a politicized issue. It shouldn't be. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, or any, one in between, you wear a mask.
I think it's a care issue. You got to care about other people. You've got to care about, and look, none of it's easy. We've spent over $10 million keeping our employees safe that I promise you wasn't in our budget.
Sure.
We had no choice. It's the right thing to do. Like at this point, it's smart business, because without those people, and I think essential workers At the beginning of COVID, there was more talk about it, but it's relevant to me every single day. My workers who come in, they're working in tough, refrigerated plant or out in the field.
Right.
These are tough jobs. They kill themselves. They work really hard for us. And my job as a leader is to protect them. That's the first job. Like, if you don't care about your employees, and I think the companies that represent that are going to have a disproportionate, one, their employees are going to appreciate it. But two, it's clear to people, the companies that I think are taking the right actions. And that's going to accrue to the image of the company and your brand. And so I don't think you get a free pass here. You did the wrong things. People are going to remember.
Eaters and consumers will remember, what happened during this time, and they'll turn to companies who they believe in. I think we're going to have more sort of, really aware consumers. We're having them right now, but even more so post-COVID.
I think we've got the most activated
Go ahead.
time in our history. I think people are very activated, and whatever side, I don't think it's about politics. I think it's about making positive change and getting into a dialogue and how to do that. And look, the food system, one of the real benefits of COVID is everyone went home for 6 months, got reacquainted with their families, didn't travel. They're saving money. And you know what they're doing? They're cooking. Yeah. And I think cooking as a societal bridge, as a fabric for families and communities is critical. And actually, it's going to allow people to be healthier and also have a much more connection to their food. And I think all of that can accrue to a healthier society. And, I think you got to take these tough times and you got to find the silver lining. That's what no one's doing. They're just, they're just yelling at each other.
They sure are. I do want to get back to this I'm a big fan of learning more about food and ag tech. Food Tank runs something called the Refresh Working Group, which brings together scientists, farmers, company leaders like yourself, the whole range of food system stakeholders to talk about the cost and benefits of technology in our food and agriculture systems. And one of the things that often comes up is this issue around labor because of robotics. Mm-hmm. And folks are concerned that we'll lose jobs, especially for, the farm workers who often don't have other skill sets. Weeding is what they know how to do, and they often know how to do it really well and better than, most of us who were born here know how to do. And there's an issue, around obviously immigration and folks' status. So I'm wondering how you sort of approach that if we're replacing those laborers with robotics, how that will affect, our economy and economies around the globe.
Yeah, it's a great question. And look, I think our economy, particularly California and the Midwest, big agricultural regions, Florida in their own way. Look, immigrant labor is critical to all of those, high labor kind of jobs. Carrots happen to be pretty automated, but I see a transition happening, and it goes to the same thing that's aging out of the kind of farming families, which is these second generation families. Many people who came to work for us in the field, they then sent their kids to school. Their kids are coming back and they're working for us in higher kind of oriented jobs, like more technology jobs. And I think that's the secret to America, is that upward mobility. Mm-hmm. And so, I think if we lose some jobs I've been in the fields, when you're talking about picking a lot of different commodities fields, these are very, very, very difficult jobs. Absolutely. And they're paid relative to the physical exertion, not what they're worth. I think we can replace those jobs. Our goal then is to create the next generation of jobs. It's like clean energy jobs versus coal. Sure. We want to create the next group of jobs. And look, a lot of these are people working with machines so they can be more productive. And that's that's kind of a higher order skill. So I actually think we have a huge opportunity. In the same way we can create through alternative energy green jobs, green agriculture is going to create all kinds of new jobs, and they're going to be higher order jobs. Now, the other piece we need is better immigration policy. Absolutely. We actually need an immigration policy. We need these people. No, Americans don't want to do these jobs, even in a recession. And so, whether it's more tech-oriented jobs, we need more of those folks. Those are part of our secret, or kind of these entry-level, jobs. We need a coherent immigration policy. Absolutely. And immigration translates to better economic conditions. These are facts.
They
You know,
are.
get the populism and the noise out. And so I actually am excited. And we've got so many young people working for us who are excited about creating this next generation of jobs that are more like, I'll tell you one story. I've got a guy who's worked in our plant for a long time. We showed him this camera system and he almost cried. He was like, Jeff, I can have that on my phone and I can kind of keep up with all my people because I'm all over the plant. And he said, and it's not about playing got you, it's about supporting those people so he can be a better boss. And he said, this is the best thing ever. Like, so technology, if done correctly, makes people more effective, creates more
Absolutely.
opportunity. And that's how I characterize it.
And you mentioned aging farmers before. I mean, the average age of farmers in the United States is 60 plus years old. And, we need to make rural areas more stimulating, and intellectually stimulating places to live. That's one way to do it, is to have, better technology, ways for people to interact better, ways to keep them engaged.
Yeah, and I think that's look, the move out of big cities back to these secondary and tertiary sized cities. Bakersfield's on fire. We're like our hottest place in California, because we got jobs and a relatively, for California, affordable cost of living. And people, particularly millennials with young families, want homes because it's become the center of kind of work, school, et cetera. So
Absolutely.
there's a big shift that's going on. And look, attitudinally, I've never met a consumer who didn't want better food, cleaner food, healthier food, tastier food, more affordable food.
Yeah.
This, again, shouldn't be a political issue. And even the fast food guys and the processed food guys who I pick on, they're getting this. They're trying to clean their labels up. They're trying to do what they can, Campbell's included, within the scope of what their business is today. But what we know and what, your audience and what you're so effective at helping people understand is there's a better way. There's a healthier way. You don't have to give anything up. That's what I love about our new Wonder Roots, like carrot hot dogs. Man, it's a hot dog. It bites like a hot dog. It tastes like a carrot, but it's smoky like a hot dog.
I want to get into this. You mentioned Impossible. You mentioned Beyond Meat. Those are very ultra, processed foods.
Ultra processed.
They're delicious. My husband loves them, but they're not as healthy as as you said, eating a carrot hot dog. And I want you to talk a little bit about these.
Yeah, so Wonder Roots is our new platform, for Bolthouse, which is really taking carrot and taking it into swaps, right? So we talk about meat swaps, carb swaps, and we think swaps are exactly on a flexitarian diet what people do. They're just looking for things to swap out. Look, we got to eat every day, right? It's not like, changing the world, but maybe a little bit. So Wonder Roots, 3 platforms initially, and we'll have more. The first one's really carrot fettuccine, which are long strips of carrot. And we're selling those as a kit with marinara. We've got a couple other flavors, and put them in a pan, 2 minutes. And you've got carrot fettuccine, much better than squash. Squash gets squashy, it gets a little watery and stuff. Carrot holds up, it's al dente, it's beautiful. Then we got a carrot rice kit, like fried rice with carrot rice. Carrot rice, our competition there is really cauliflower rice, which is white, but kind of the flavor's not as good as carrots, because I'm very pro carrot. So, the rice kits, but then and these all came out of literally one of our product developers. We got a great, incredible product development team. And one young man, and Courtney's his name, and Courtney said, Jeff, I think we can take carrots and do things nobody thinks we can do. And he shaved some carrots down, created these carrot hot dogs, and brined them, and in spices. Just brining is just basically marinating in spices. And then we went over and we tasted them, and we couldn't believe it. But the bite, it feels it sensorily. It's very much like a hot dog. And look, hot dogs are 20 billion a year in the United States. 75 hot dogs per person, 95% eaten at home. Think about that for a second. I sell a lot of carrots, and if I get 1% of the hot dog market, it's a big market. And the thing about it is, we put it in front of kids. We're doing a lot of work. There's our carrot fettuccine, beautiful. And the carrot hot dogs, I put it in front of kids who have 3 different flavors, like regular hot dog and then a chorizo. And we put these in front of kids and husbands and moms, and we're blown away. Not only, what they said to us, they said, this is exactly what we need. We need to get more, vegetables in all of our diets, but we get bored with it. And this is just something. And look, maybe we have hot dogs and carrot dogs. We put them all on the grill.
Absolutely.
I don't tend to want to tell people how they should eat. I want to give them better options and then let them decide. That's much more sustainable. And this is just the beginning for us. We call meat swaps. We've got some other super interesting things, but like carrot will launch in the spring. My goal is to hijack opening day in baseball. Hopefully ballparks are open and put a carrot dog in everybody's hand, because baseball, hot dogs in the American way. Why not baseball, carrot dogs in the American way?
Absolutely. So I want to get into this issue. I mean, everyone, as you said before, wants better food. They want fresh fruits and vegetables. They want things that taste good, that make them feel good, that affect their health. But access and affordability are huge issues. And there are, food apartheid has created a lot of underserved communities across the United States and across the world. How does a company like Bolthouse create better access and affordability to these wonderful products, these products that can really help people?
Yeah, look, from affordability standpoint, the nice thing about carrot, it's very affordable. These kits, we're finalizing the pricing, but they'll be, accessible to any consumer. Like they won't be kind of targeted at, upper income consumers. So affordability, almost everything we're doing, we want to be kind of at a price point where the average consumer, Walmart average consumer to me is like, people don't think about it. That's the middle, right? That's the middle. And we really use that kind of consumer to say, given their discretionary income, can they kind of afford this? And so the great thing about what we're doing, unlike maybe Impossible and Beyond, they had to come down the cost curve to kind of compete with me, right? We're already much more affordable on a cost per pound basis than meat. And so carrot hot dogs, for example, we've looked at versus regular hot dogs, and will be materially cheaper than regular hot dogs. And so you don't have to give anything up. If the sensory experience is there, if the price is same or better, right? And then all of a sudden you're not making the trade-off. Part of the problem with vegan products was, if I wanted a vegan hot dog, it was, maybe $3.99 for a regular hot dog. It was $7.99 for a vegan hot dog.
Absolutely.
Therefore, you self-limited the potential. That's affordability. Accessibility. Look, Sam, Cass, and I, we got to know each other with, our previous first lady and everything Michelle Obama did to help food, which is, one of the most things I'm most proud of. They backtracked with the current administration, but we're going to fix that and get back to kids in school having real healthy food every single day. And so one of the things we've talked about a lot is we need a new model of accessibility. And I'm not sure what that model is, but we have to incent grocers and others to go into every community. We need to create incentives for corner stores to have healthier food.
Absolutely.
Philadelphia has done a great job in that regard.
For sure.
And we have to educate. And schools are, like, COVID proved this. Schools are the heart of that, because that's where those kids are getting most of their food. And many families, particularly lower income, rely on that food. So they were so smart to focus there. So we have to go back to that. We have to re-energize that effort.
Absolutely.
And, I hope the next administration will do that, because the underlying health conditions, which have been so clear to exacerbate the impact of COVID, we predicted this for a long time. Obesity, metabolic condition. When you then put a stress into that, exactly what COVID did, you're going to have a very negative health outcome.
Absolutely.
And we can fix it. This is something we can fix.
Absolutely. And to go so far backward, over the last 4 years. And again, Food Tank is not political, but we did go backward on schools and school nutrition over the last 4 years. And this new model of accessibility, you're right, we don't have an answer to it, but what we need is people thinking about it. We need people thinking about these issues again at the federal leadership level, because we have ignored them for too long. I want to ask you about, again, your role as a CEO. One of the things that Food Tank recently started is we put together a group of chief sustainability officers at different companies, small, large, medium-sized, in the food space, and really bringing them together in a non-competitive way so that they can learn from their peers. And I wonder what your thoughts are, on that kind of sharing among corporations, right? I mean, I think, so many companies, so many smaller and medium-sized companies are being acquired by larger food companies. I think that's what happened in Bolthouse's case. And sometimes that really works out. Sometimes the bigger company learns a lot from the smaller company. The smaller company has, more advantages in terms of marketing than it did before. What are your thoughts on companies coming together? I think there's a real opportunity, as you said, with COVID-19 for more sort of information sharing, for technological sharing, for not just sort of always being competitive, but for a space that really allows for that kind of collaboration, uncommon collaboration for sure, that's needed to improve the food system, to fight, the climate crisis and the other global shocks that are coming our way.
Strangely enough, and I'm kind of hard on corporations sometimes, big companies, and look, I've worked for them. I've been inside and outside that world a lot. But the thing I love about them is they respond to the marketplace. Unlike some of the political, stuff where it's just, you get gaslighted to death. Corporations can't do it anymore. The consumers don't let them. So they have to respond to what their consumers care about. That's very productive, I think. And I see this next generation of leaders coming, or maybe the, 10 years behind me, that deeply understand this and are willing to take positions on things. Maybe they're a little controversial, because the days of I support everybody and I don't take a position, particularly on a controversial issue for a brand or a company, it's tough. People want to know what you stand for. So come back to particularly sustainability, climate change, and how we need to build resiliency into all of our systems, including the food system, given climate change. This is the issue of our life.
Yeah.
COVID is a symptom. The disease is climate change, right? Overpopulation,
Absolutely.
driving climate change, driving these results. So I think big corporations, and there are a number of them, they're really leading against this. Maybe European corporations that, Nestle and others, who are building, in Nestle's case, they're pivoting to really more health company, but also looking to partnership on sustainability and also creating more transparency. And one of the things I was really proud that Denise tried to do at Campbell's, and they're still is to create, for a food company, one of the most transparent food companies. We launched websites. We showed everybody where things were coming from. I think that's the first step, that transparency, where big corporations really don't have any choice, but they activate that. They actually play into it, make themselves, their supply chains more transparent. Therefore, you'll have more accountability, because remember, they can't hide. They want to surface, issues and understand them, because that's the only way to deal with them. So I think tools that allow that collaboration, particularly digitally, will be really important in the future. Because ultimately, if I'm a consumer, we've talked about this for 10 years, but we're almost getting there, where I can walk into any grocery store now and I can pull up a UPC, or I can put up any label, and eventually I'm going to be able to see where that product came from and what were the working conditions and all those things.
Absolutely.
And so I do think corporations need to work much harder together. And I'll give you another example, and I'll pick on soft drinks. But 15 years ago at Coke, I was on them on PET recycling, that we need a systemic solution to PET recycling, microplastics in the ocean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that needs to be a moonshot kind of effort. This was 15 years ago. They couldn't get their heads wrapped around it. The first thing we needed was national recycling, but what we really needed was compostable bottles, or, to eliminate the use of single-use plastics completely. And it's a really difficult problem. And, everyone, look, I still use, PET bottles, and I want a different solution. I think this is a good example where many companies need to come together, because you can't solve the problem as an individual company. It's almost impossible. Even the Cokes of the world's too big. So I think that, these are the areas where kind of moonshot approaches and some government and business partnership on these things could actually break through and make a change. So that's the place I'd like to see more effort.
Yeah, me too, definitely. We had a question from the audience about what Bolthouse Farms is doing to rejuvenate soil. So this is a big, regenerative food systems.
Yeah,
it's where we're
we
at.
talk about this every day. So thank you, Dr. Bond. Regenerative agriculture, which is only done primarily at small scale. Kind of the guys at Blue Hill are the best of it, because regenerative agriculture is really not just rotations, but the nature of how you do the rotations, and then animals kind of coming through that land, creating soil health. So soil health is the whole ballgame. About 75% of what we grow today is conventional, 25% organic. Organic's growing faster. We need to move that more towards organic at an even more accelerated rate. But the whole secret, both conventionally and organics, is rotations. Limiting, using data and a lot of the tools we talked about earlier to limit the use of inputs. But the way you limit the use of inputs is you have better rotations, so you naturally get that soil health, right? It's binary. If you don't get it this way, you got to get it that way. So for us, we're analyzing all of that using kind of agronomic data to start to say, how do we use more precise delivery of inputs, measuring the soil, all those kinds of things. So if we have to use them, we use the absolute right amount. Mm-hmm. And then we are very conscious to runoff. So the right amount, many of the problems with pesticides, overuse leads to runoff into lakes and those kinds of things. So really precise utilization. But we're just starting now a project to better understand what would regenerative agriculture at scale mean.
Sure.
By the way, there's some real experts in the subject. But when you start to say, if you want the animal part of regenerative agriculture, there's a great new documentary called Kiss the Ground that was done by some folks out here in California. And it's really interesting, but it's small scale. There's things no-till. There's lots of things we're already doing. But if you really want to regenerate the soil, I think we need, a whole new approach to it. And so I would say we're coming at it both ways. What can we do today with existing technologies? But then I believe that we'll have a regenerative designation within a relatively short period of time. I actually think that regenerative food will be the next organic food.
Sure. I mean, the regenerative organic label is already out there, used by Dr. Bronner's and some others. And I think the major criticisms, companies like yours, is that you're growing, whether it's carrots or other vegetables, you're still growing, large swaths of them as sort of a monoculture. And I think that's kind of, where people get a little bit like, well, it's just big, whether it's organic or not, it's big agriculture, whether it's plant-based or not. And so that's, a lot of what I hear from folks who are concerned about these issues.
Yeah, scale is the issue. I mean, look, scale agriculture, and I kind of take exception to agribusiness being a negative term. Look, most of what we eat is now, grown by large scale agriculture, right? Farmers markets are a very, very small part. They play an incredibly important role for small farmers, and they continue, particularly in light of what's happened with food service. The issue is with the scale of carrots we grow and deliver to grocery stores for people. Even if we went to 100% organic, you wouldn't be all the way there. This is where technology comes. We actually, and look, is there a day where maybe, we grow in kind of 4-foot sections? Could a field be 4 feet of carrots and then 4 feet of okra? And then, yeah, there's only one way to do that: advanced robotics and technology. Otherwise, you got, the economics will never hold up. This is my point about the moonshot on these things. If I was president, I wouldn't be just funneling money from my trade war to the Midwest. If we spent $50 billion, which is what we gave in subsidies in the Midwest, and spent it on a partnership of technology to reinvent agriculture and digitize it, leveraging all the emerging technologies, maybe we can make some progress as a country.
Well, and Jeff, your crops, the things that you grow, are still considered specialty crops under USDA designation. When they're the most important crops for immunity, for nourishment, for making us all happy. They make things taste good. Commodity crops don't taste that good on their own. The things that Bolthouse and other farmers are growing, whether they're small or large, make other foods taste good.
Well, they're food. I mean, when we talk about eating plants, I'm not talking about eating soybeans. I'm talking about plants with macro and micronutrients. I don't think there was a study done on dogs. They're one of my favorite studies. They're feeding dogs dog food, just regular old dog food. I don't know what brand it was, and then they added to their dog food fresh cut up vegetables. The incidence of cancer in the control, in the test group versus control group of dogs went down 60%.
Wow.
I don't think it's an issue of look, reducing the unhealthy stuff is important, but the studies are starting to show it's more about adding the healthy stuff.
Right.
Just eat more plants. Guess what? Have your hot dog, your regular hot dog. I don't care. Eat more plants. But when we say plants, we mean mostly vegetables, a little bit of fruit, mostly vegetables, right? And so the idea that we're a specialty crop, I think vegetables are the core of our nutritional platform.
Absolutely.
So we have to reframe all this. It's ultimately a marketing communication thing, because meat and potatoes, which really came from our, European kind of cultural roots, like in most of the world, is not a meat and potatoes game. Most of the world, we're such a diverse culture now. It's really more about vegetables with a little protein, thrown in. And again, I think people are being very smart about evolving their thinking there. But look, the issue of scale and scale solutions, this is where big business comes in. You love big business, you can hate them, but they're where all the scale and the heft is. So the key is consumers demanding and customers demanding of these food producers, produce producers, meat producers to do it better. And I actually think that's already been going on for a long time.
Sure.
But with COVID, I think it's put it on steroids. I think the underlying conditions, and look, it's the intersection of climate change, healthcare, and happiness and consumer well-being.
Yeah, I love the happiness part. We forget that food is meant to be joyous. No matter where you're eating or what you're eating, it's meant to be joyous. We talked a lot about enlightened CEOs and enlightened companies, but we also have, like, as you just said, enlightened consumers who are demanding this, and companies need to respond. Jeff, we've talked a lot about politics over the last 40 or so minutes. Before we end, please give people the URL where they can get more information about Bolthouse, and then I'll ask you our final question.
Bolthouse, www.bolthouse.com. We've got our information, and look, we're very, all our social media platforms, we respond. We're in a dialogue with our consumers every day, and we really think that's incredibly important. And look, we got an election coming. There's a lot of trouble in the world, but sure. I lead people with everything. There's a lot of optimism too. There's so much great stuff happening. So many people are working so hard to feed you and take care of you. With all the noise in the media, sometimes a little more positive take on this, because I think people have done incredibly during COVID and really Herculean efforts.
Absolutely. And what I hope is happening, and what Bob Martin from the Center for a Livable Future at Johns Hopkins also hopes, and many others, is this idea of a citizen eater, someone who votes with their fork and with their vote. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
I think if you take healthcare and climate change as two of the biggest issues, if not the two big issues that we have to deal with, both run directly through the food system. The fact that food hasn't been a political issue is maybe a good thing, but it hasn't gotten the attention of the politicians such the resources are deployed optimally relative to creating a healthier food system and healthier consumers. It was in the previous administration. That is the legacy of Michelle Obama's incredible. We need to get back to it. Like, again, you can wish COVID away and you can wish obesity away, but there's only one way, to be healthier in this, and it's to get healthier, and we need a collective effort to do that. So I look, consumer has already decided this in some sense. They might not have acted on it, but this is the attitudinal stuff. If you take 18 to 29-year-olds, 60% believe that them eating a plant-based diet is good for their health and good for the planet, and they intend to eat more of a plant-based diet going forward. This is not going to change. That attitude will stay with them for life. So if you don't respond to it as a company, you do so at your own risk.
Absolutely. Good for you, good for the planet. These are the kinds of foods we all want to eat. Thank you so much, Jeff. It was a pleasure to see you again. Thanks
Great
for
to
taking
see
the time.
You, Dani.